The most humiliating moment of Stella Hayes' life didn't happen in private. It happened in front of 500 people under the crystal chandeliers of the Thorne Foundation Gala. This was the empire she built, and she was being treated like a ghost. Her ex-husband Anton stood on stage, his arm around his new younger wife, toasting a future she had designed. She was erased. So Stella did the only thing she could. She turned, held her head high, and began to walk out in total silence. The whispers died. The crowd parted. And just as her hand touched the cold brass of the exit door, a voice cut through the silence. A man stepped from the shadows. He was the one man her ex-husband was desperate to impress. He was Julian Sinclair. And as the whole room watched, the billionaire lifted her hand and everyone stared. The invitation was an assault. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a summons, a command performance. It arrived on a Tuesday in a creamy heavyweight cardstock so thick it felt like a weapon. The Thorne Foundation inaugural gala, engraved in charcoal beneath a gaudy new T crest that looked suspiciously like a ripoff of a French luxury brand. Stella Hayes held it over the trash can in her small paint-flecked Soho loft. Her fingers, stained with cobalt blue from the canvas she'd been wrestling with all morning, trembled slightly. She shouldn't go. Going was insane. It was exactly what Anton wanted. Anton Thorne, her ex-husband, the man who had taken her quiet, brilliant mind, her groundbreaking algorithms, and her loyal, trusting heart, and used them as fuel to build an empire. Thorne Dynamics. It had been their name. Their dream sketched on cocktail napkins in a dingy college bar. Now it was just his. The divorce had been surgical in its brutality. He had the high-powered lawyers from Skadden Arps. She had a public defender who seemed perpetually overwhelmed. Anton had argued that her contribution was emotional, not structural. The code she wrote, early drafts. The business plan, a collaborative effort. The patents. They were, by some legal witchcraft she still didn't understand, filed under the corporate entity, not her name. He bought her out for a sum that was to him a rounding error. To her it was just enough to disappear, to lease this loft, and to return to her first love painting. She was surviving. But he wasn't content with her survival. He needed her submission. This gala wasn't a charity event. It was a coronation. A celebration of his new life. His new wife, Isabella Vance, a 24-year-old influencer whose only visible contribution to society was her Instagram follower count and the final public erasure of Stella Hayes. Why send her an invitation? Because he knew her. He knew she wouldn't come. He wanted her to receive it, to feel small, to look at the +1, and know she had no one, and to throw it in the trash. He wanted the knowledge that she was at home alone, while he and Isabella were celebrated by the New York elite. A familiar cold rage licked at her heels. It was the same rage that had fueled her through 90-hour work weeks debugging code until her vision blurred. "No," she whispered to the empty room, the smell of turpentine sharp in her nostrils. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of her absence. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't be the madwoman in the attic of his new shiny life. She picked up her phone and dialed her best friend Sarah, a sharp-witted journalist who had seen the whole train wreck happen in real time. "Don't you dare," Sarah said before Stella could even speak. "I saw the announcement on page 6. Stella, it's a trap. He's a narcissistic sociopath. He's baiting you." "I know," Stella said, walking to her closet. It was a meager closet filled with denim linen shirts and paint-stained coveralls. What does one wear to their own funeral? "Stella, I'm serious. You go there, he'll have security remove you. He'll have Isabella accidentally spill champagne on you. Don't play his game." Stella paused, her hand landing on a garment bag pushed way into the back. It was the one thing of value she had fought for. "I'm not playing his game, Sarah. I'm just going to remind him that I exist." She pulled out the dress. It wasn't new. It was vintage. A deep, almost black emerald velvet dress from the 1990s, a classic Halston. It was simple, severe, and elegant. It had no glitter, no sequins, no brand new money flash. It was a dress that relied entirely on the woman wearing it. "Okay," Stella said, zipping the bag. "I'm going." "Then you need armor," Sarah replied. "Don't go alone. I'll call—" "I don't know. I'll call my cousin the paralegal. He's cute in a paralegal way." Stella laughed a dry, rusty sound. "No, Sarah. That's the point. I am going alone. I'm not bringing a +1 to prove I'm over it. I'm just going. As Stella Hayes, the woman who built Thorn Dynamics. Let them choke on it." The night of the gala, the air in New York was crisp, the sky a clear, cold black. Stella did her own makeup, a little mascara, a bold, dark red lip. She wore her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her only jewelry was a pair of simple pearl earrings. When the Uber pulled up to the curb at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Anton had of course rented out the entire Temple of Dender. She felt the first flicker of true fear. The entrance was a chaotic circus of flashing bulbs, screaming paparazzi, and black SUVs disgorging women in shimmering gowns. She paid, her driver stepped out, and the world immediately went silent. The paparazzi didn't know who she was. She was a non-entity. She walked past the red carpet, past the velvet ropes, and presented her invitation to the security guard. The man, built like a refrigerator, barely glanced at her. "Name? Stella Hayes." His eyes snapped up. He looked from her face to his iPad, then back to her face. A flicker of, was it pity? He pressed his earpiece. "We have a guest, a Ms. Stella Hayes." A pause. Stella's blood turned to ice. This was the plan. He'd invited her just to have her turned away at the door, the ultimate public humiliation. The guard listened. "Yes, sir, I understand." He looked at Stella, his face impassive. "Go ahead, ma'am." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She walked up the grand steps, the sounds of the party washing over her, a string quartet, the tinkling of glasses, the loud braying laughter of New York's new aristocracy. She stepped into the hall and the room froze. It wasn't a sudden silence. It was a rolling wave of it. The friends who had known her for a decade, who had eaten at her dinner table, Chloe and David, the venture capitalists, Mark, his former COO, all of them saw her. Their eyes widened, their smiles faltered, and then one by one they turned their backs. They chose. In that instant, they all chose. From across the room on a raised dais, she saw him. Anton. He was magnificent in a custom Brioni tux. And beside him, Isabella, draped in a diamond-encrusted, barely there Versace dress, looking like a predator. Anton saw her. He didn't look angry. He didn't look shocked. He looked pleased. He raised his champagne glass to her in a silent toast. The trap was sprung, and she had walked right into it. The air in the Temple of Dender was thick and suffocating. Stella felt the weight of 500 pairs of eyes. This was worse than being turned away at the door. This was being put in the stocks of public curiosity. The poor delusional ex-wife. She forced her feet to move. Dignity. That's all you have left. Don't let him take that. Her plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Get a glass of champagne, stand in a corner, be seen, and then leave, a ghost haunting the feast. She walked toward the bar. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes walked directly towards her, saw her, and then abruptly pivoted, offering the tray to a group of women who were already laughing and pointing at Stella's dress. "Is that vintage?" one of them whispered, loud enough to carry. "I mean, I know recycling is in, but—" Stella's face burned. She reached the bar. The bartender, a young man with a handlebar mustache, was serving 3 people at once. Stella stood waiting patiently. She waited for 5 minutes, then 10. He served people who arrived after her. He looked through her. "Excuse me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The bartender didn't flinch. "Excuse me," she said louder. He turned his face, a mask of polite contempt. "Yes, I'd like a glass of champagne." "We're out," he said, and turned to pop a new bottle of Dom Perignon. Stella's hands clenched. This wasn't an accident. This was a directive. Anton hadn't just invited her. He had briefed the staff. She turned away from the bar, her thirst suddenly unbearable. She scanned the room, a sea of hostile, smiling faces. She saw David, the VC, who had been at their wedding, the godfather to her. No, she couldn't think about that. David? She called, a flicker of desperate hope. He looked, met her eyes. His face was pale. He put his head down, mumbled something to his wife, and steered her firmly in the opposite direction. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, it was almost clarifying. There was no one here to save her. She was entirely, terrifyingly alone. And then the music softened. The lights dimmed, save for a single brilliant spotlight on the dais. Anton tapped the microphone. Friends, partners, visionaries. His voice boomed, rich and practiced. He had always been a great performer. Stella's blood ran cold. She was trapped. She couldn't leave in the middle of his speech. It would be a scene. She backed into the shadow of a towering Egyptian column, hoping to be swallowed by the darkness. Tonight, Anton continued, we celebrate a new beginning, the Thorn Foundation. A dream I have had for a very long time. A lie. Stella thought bitterly. His dream had been a corner office. Her dream had been the foundation, the give back, the legacy. He was even stealing her discarded dreams. But no man is an island, he said, turning to Isabella, who preened under the light. We all need inspiration. We all need a muse. The word muse hung in the air, a poisoned dart. My whole life I was building the machine, Anton said, his voice dropping to a confidential, intimate tone. I was all logic, all code. He gestured, and the spotlight found Stella in her dark corner. It wasn't an accident. The technician must have had a precise order. Stella froze, a rabbit caught in the glare. Hundreds of heads swiveled toward her. I was stuck in the past, Anton said, his eyes locking on hers. Stuck with old ideas, old baggage. The room was silent. This was an execution. And then, he said, I met Isabella. He turned back to the blonde, grabbing her hand. She unlocked the vision. She showed me what Thorn Dynamics could be, what I could be, this foundation, this future. It is all because of her. The lie was so audacious, so complete, that Stella felt a hysterical laugh bubble in her throat. Isabella. The woman who thought Python was a brand of handbag Isabella had inspired. This Isabella took the mic, her voice high and breathless. Thank you, baby. And I just want to say, to new beginnings, and to leaving the past, and all its, failures, exactly where they belong. The spotlight on Stella snapped off, plunging her back into darkness. But it was too late. The laughter, at first hesitant, then bold, rolled through the crowd. That was it. The final cut. The end. Stella felt nothing. The pain was so deep it had become numbness. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a reaction. In the darkness she turned. She set her shoulders. She put one velvet-clad foot in front of the other. She began to walk. The silent walk. She walked out from the shadow of the column. The laughter died as she emerged. The whispers stopped. The string quartet faltered. The only sound was the click, click, click of her simple heels on the polished marble floor. She walked with her back straight, her chin high. She didn't look at Anton. She didn't look at Isabella. She looked at the massive gilded double doors of the exit 100 feet away. It was the longest walk of her life. She passed tables of people she had known for 15 years. They stared, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity, most with a cold, triumphant, I told you so smirk. She was the ghost of partnerships past the warning. Click, click, click. She was halfway there. She could feel Anton's eyes on her back burning. He was enjoying this This was the climax of his performance. The ex-wife defeated, slinking away into the night. She reached the grand foyer. The doors were right there. Just a few more steps. She could taste the cold, clean night air. She could go home, lock her door, and let the grief finally break her. Her hand, shaking, reached for the cold, heavy brass handle of the door. "Leaving so soon, Ms. Hayes?" The voice was not loud. It was deep, precise, and cut through the absolute silence of the room like a scalpel. Stella froze. Her hand hovered over the brass. She turned her head. He was stepping out of an alcove, a space she hadn't even noticed. He wasn't in the light. He was the shadow. But now he was moving into the foyer. He was a legend, a ghost of a different kind. He was Julian Sinclair. Julian Sinclair was not a man. He was a myth. He was old money tech, a Silicon Valley kingmaker who had disappeared from public view 5 years ago only to emerge as the most powerful and reclusive private investor on the planet. He didn't just invest in companies, he anointed them. To be funded by Sinclair Ventures was to be told you were the future. He was the man Anton Thorne had been obsessed with for a year. Project Ares. Anton's new vainglorious venture was dead in the water without Sinclair's backing. Stella knew Anton had been bending over backwards, calling in every favor just to get a 5-minute meeting with this man. And here he was, standing in the foyer looking at her. He was wearing a simple, brutally expensive Tom Ford suit, no tie, just a black shirt. His hair was silver at the temples, his eyes a shade of gray so pale they looked like ice. He held an unlit cigar in one hand. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with assessment. Stella's voice was gone. She just stared at him. The entire gala, 500 people, were frozen, craning their necks to see what was happening at the door. From the dais, she heard a sharp, "Who is that?" from Isabella. Julian Sinclair took one step toward Stella. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He simply held out his hand. It wasn't a gesture of chivalry like he was asking her to dance. It was a gesture of alliance. It was a business proposal. "I believe," he said, his voice carrying easily to the hushed dais, "that you and I have an announcement to make." Stella's mind went blank. But she had never met this man. She had seen his Forbes cover, that was it. Was this a mistake? Did he think she was someone else? I think you're mistaken," she whispered, her hand still frozen in midair. Julian Sinclair's eyes crinkled just slightly, a ghost of a smile. "I'm never mistaken, Ms. Hayes. You are the architect of the Ethel Protocol, are you not?" Stella's heart stopped. Ethel. It was the name of the project she'd been working on in her loft, her real work. The decentralized secure data protocol that would make Thorne Dynamics obsolete. It was her life's work, the thing she'd been building in secret, hoping to sell to, well, to anyone but Anton. How did he know that name? She hadn't told anyone, not even Sarah. How? "We have a mutual friend," Sinclair said, his voice low. "Professor Alistair Finch, her old mentor from MIT, the only man who knew the true scope of her genius. Alistair." Sinclair's hand was still there, suspended in the air between them. She looked from his hand to his ice-gray eyes. Then she looked past him into the room. She saw Anton, his face a mask of confusion and dawning, sickening realization. She saw Isabella looking annoyed. She saw the 500 friends who had turned their backs. This was a life raft. No, this was a battleship. Slowly she pulled her hand away from the door handle. She put her small, paint-stained hand into his. His grip was firm, warm, and electric. It wasn't a lover's touch. It was a contract. It was the feeling of power being transferred. "Then I suppose we shouldn't keep them waiting," she said, her voice small at first, finding a new steel-edged resonance. Julian Sinclair smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a shark that has just scented blood. He didn't just stand with her. He didn't just lead her back to a quiet table. He kept her hand tucked it into the crook of his elbow and turned. He began walking back into the gala, back toward the dais, back toward Anton. The sound in the room was a collective sibilant gasp, the sound of 500 different worldviews shattering at once. Click, click, click. Her heels sounded different now. They weren't retreating, they were advancing. They walked past the tables of gawking guests. Chloe, the woman who had mocked her dress, now looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. David, the VC who had snubbed her, was already pulling out his phone, no doubt frantically Googling Stella Hayes, Julian Sinclair. They reached the dais. Anton was standing there, his master of the universe persona having evaporated. He looked like what he was, a middle manager who had gotten lucky. "Julian, Mr. Sinclair," Anton stammered, scrambling for purchase. I didn't know you were here. My assistant said you declined." "I prefer to make my own entrance, Anton," Sinclair said, his voice booming without the need for a microphone. He turned his gaze, sweeping the entire silent room. He still had Stella's hand. "A wonderful party," Julian said. "An excellent celebration, but you seem to have buried the lead." Anton looked lost. "The lead, sir." "The real news," Julian said. He looked down at Stella, then back at the crowd. "Most of you know me. You know I don't invest in ideas. I don't invest in dreams. I invest in bedrock. I invest in the inevitable. I have spent the last 3 years searching for the inevitable future of data integrity." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Tonight, Anton, you gave a lovely speech about inspiration." He said the word inspiration like it was a piece of rotten fruit. But vision, true vision, is not about a muse. It is about architecture. He lifted Stella's hand. He didn't just lift it. He presented it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian Sinclair announced to the shocked assembly, "you are looking at the architect. I am privileged to announce tonight that Sinclair Ventures is leading the Series A funding of Ethel, a company founded, owned, and brilliantly designed by Ms. Stella Hayes." A man in the front row, the CEO of J.P. Morgan, audibly choked on his drink. "The investment," Julian continued, "will be for $250 million. The silence that followed the number $250 million was absolute. It was a gunshot in a cathedral. The collective value of every piece of jewelry, every suit, every person in that room seemed to shrink. Stella's knees went weak. $250 million. She had been in talks. Her mentor Alistair had set up a blind pitch meeting. She had presented Ethel to a small, terrifyingly intelligent team of VCs in a nondescript office in Palo Alto. They had been impressed. They had signed NDAs. They had said they would run it up the flagpole. She never in her wildest nightmares dreamed the flagpole went this high. She never dreamed it was Sinclair. This wasn't a rescue. This was an anointing. Julian Sinclair wasn't finished. He dropped her hand, and in a move of such breathtaking audacity it bordered on violence, he reached over and took the microphone directly from Anton Thorne's limp fingers. "Anton," Julian said, his voice now electronically amplified, "was just talking about Project Ares. His new venture. A commendable effort. He's been trying to get me to fund it for 6 months." The crowd murmured. This was inside baseball, and it was brutal. "But here's the problem with Project Ares," Julian continued, his voice conversational, as if he were explaining a difficult concept to a child. "It's built on a faulty premise. It's built on old tech. Specifically, it's built on the foundations of Thorne Dynamics." He looked at Anton. "And as the architect of Thorne Dynamics is standing right next to me, she can tell you, the foundation is cracked." "That's a lie." Anton finally found his voice. It was a reedy, desperate sound. "Thorne Dynamics is solid. Our Q4 projections are—" "Your projections are based on a system that Ms. Hayes designed 15 years ago," Julian cut in, his voice like a winter storm. "A system she knows is vulnerable. A system she has just rendered completely and utterly obsolete. He turned to Stella. Ms. Hayes, if you would. He was handing her the microphone, handing her the stage, handing her the world. Stella looked at the mic. She looked at the 500 faces, all of them now staring at her with a new, terrifying-looking respect. They weren't staring at an ex-wife. They were staring at a $250 million woman. She took the microphone. Her hand was perfectly, completely steady. "Mr. Sinclair is correct," she said. Her voice was clear. It was the voice of a CEO. Thorn Dynamics was a brilliant engine for its time, but it was built for a centralized world. The future is Ethel. She looked at Anton. For the first time that night, she truly looked at him, and she felt nothing. No, not nothing. She felt pity. Ethel, she explained, her voice gaining strength, is a decentralized quantum-encrypted data protocol. It doesn't store information. It secures it. It makes the very concept of a data breach like the one Thorn Dynamics suffered last quarter an impossibility. Anton's face went white. The data breach had been a secret. They'd paid millions to bury it. How did she know? How did Sinclair know Project Ares? Stella concluded, is a beautiful, expensive 12-cylinder engine that you are trying to put into a horse-drawn carriage. Ethel is the new vehicle. She handed the microphone back to Julian. So, Julian said with a shrug, there it is. My apologies for hijacking your party, Anton. But, business. He turned to Stella. Ms. Hayes, our partners are waiting. He gestured. And as if on cue, a new group of people began to move through the crowd. They weren't the friends who had snubbed her. These were the other apex predators. Stella recognized them from the covers of Wired and The Economist. There was Ms. Smith, the head of the largest sovereign wealth fund in Asia. Mr. Aramov, the Israeli cybersecurity billionaire. They weren't moving toward Julian. They were moving toward her. Stella. Anton's voice was a desperate bark. Stella, you can't. We have a non-compete. This is a violation. You're suing me. Stella was about to answer, but Julian put a calming hand on her arm. He looked at Anton with an expression of profound boredom. Anton, please, don't embarrass yourself, Julian said. Your own lawyers from the esteemed Skadden Arps wrote the termination agreement. He snapped his fingers. A severe-looking woman in a black suit who had appeared from nowhere handed him a single folded paper. Julian opened it. Divorce Decree Appendix B, Intellectual Property. It states, and I quote, Stella Hayes relinquishes all claims to intellectual property currently held by the corporate entity Thorn Dynamics. It says nothing about future IP. He continued, and the non-compete. It was voided under Clause 4B, subsection A, the moment you bought her out for a sum not commensurate with her initial contribution. Your own lawyers, in their haste to screw her, left a back door the size of a stadium. Julian folded the paper and handed it back to Anton. You didn't just buy her out, Anton. You set her free. And you did it for pennies on the dollar. It's the single dumbest trade in corporate history. He turned to Stella. Now, I believe Ms. Smith had a question about your quantum encryption key. He placed a hand on the small of her back. It was again not intimate. It was a gesture of guardianship. He steered her away from the dais, away from her ex-husband, and into the center of the room where a new circle was forming. The party didn't stop. It realigned. The center of gravity had shifted from Anton Thorn to Stella Hayes. The whispers were back, but now they were different. Ethel, did you hear? My God, she was the brains all along. 250 million? Where can I invest? Anton was left on the dais, a king in an empty court. The spotlight was still on him, but he looked small, pale, and utterly, totally irrelevant. And Isabella. Isabella was looking at Anton, not with love, not with adoration, but with the cold, hard calculation of a woman who just realized her investment had gone bust. The rest of the evening was a blur, a chaotic, exhilarating symphony of new power. Stella was no longer a ghost. She was the most solid person in the room. People who had looked through her hours earlier were now shoving their way past billionaires just to touch her arm to press a business card into her hand. Stella, darling. Chloe, the woman who had mocked her vintage dress, gushed her face a mask of frantic, sweating friendliness. I knew you were working on something massive. That dress it's a power move. We must have lunch. My fund were very interested in the ethel space. Stella smiled a cool, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you, Chloe. I'll have my people call you. She had no people, but she knew as she said it that by morning she would. Julian Sinclair remained by her side, a silent, powerful sentinel. He deflected the fools and amplified the important. He was a master conductor, guiding the flow of conversation, seamlessly introducing her to the right partners, the right banks, the right legal teams. Stella, you know Mr. Aramov. He believes your protocol could revolutionize Mideast cybersecurity. Ms. Hayes, Ms. Smith has a question about scalability for the Asian market. Stella, for her part, was transformed. The shy, wounded artist was gone. The architect was back. She spoke about data sharding, quantum entanglement, and serverless protocols with a fluency and passion that was undeniable. She was, in a word, brilliant, and the room, which respected only money and genius, was now prostrate at her feet. But the night wasn't over. The war was being fought on two fronts. The first was the social front. As Julian was steering Stella toward the exit, a new shrill voice cut through the din. You! Stella turned. Isabella Thorne was stumbling toward them. Her perfect makeup now smudged her diamond dress, looking cheap. She was drunk and she was furious. Isabella! Anton was right behind her, trying to grab her arm, his face pleading. Don't. Not here. Get off me, Anton, she shrieked, batting his hand away. She pointed a long, manicured, shaking finger at Stella. You snake, you pathetic, scheming snake. The room went quiet again. This was the drama they had all come for. You think this is a victory? Isabella sneered, her voice slurring. You think you won. He's still my husband. He still comes home to me. You're still the first one. The one he threw away. Stella looked at her. She felt no anger. She looked at this 24-year-old woman draped in diamonds she hadn't earned, screaming in a museum she hadn't paid for, and she felt that same profound pity she'd felt for Anton. Isabella, Stella said, her voice calm and even. You're right. He is your husband. And this, she gestured to the room, to the investors, to the new reality, is your problem, not mine. What does that mean? Isabella stammered. It means, Stella said, stepping closer, that you're married to a man who just lost $250 million in funding he was counting on. You're married to a man whose flagship company, Thorn Dynamics, I am going to gut, dismantle, and sell for parts over the next 6 months. You're married to a man whose entire net worth is tied to a company built on old baggage. Stella leaned in. He's not coming home to you, Isabella. He's coming home to his balance sheet. And I just set it on fire. She looked at the younger woman's horrified, confused face. Get a good lawyer, and this time you pay for him. Stella turned and walked away. The second front was the legal one. As they reached the grand entrance, a fuming, white-faced Anton finally caught up. He blocked their path. This isn't over, Stella, he hissed, all pretense of charm gone. You stole that code. Ethel was my idea. You were developing it on my time. Was I? Stella asked, tilting her head. I seem to recall developing it in my un-air-conditioned loft after you had my keycards to Thorn Dynamics deactivated. I believe the legal term for that is my time. I will sue you into the Stone Age, he roared. No, a quiet voice said. It was Julian who had been watching the exchange with mild interest. "You won't. Stay out of this, Sinclair. This is between me and my—" He stopped, realizing his mistake. "You're—" Julian prompted, one eyebrow raised. "This is my business," Anton finished lamely. "No, Anton," Julian said, stepping forward, his physical presence suddenly overwhelming. "This is my business. You see, when you're dealing with a $250 million investment, you do your due diligence. My legal team, who are significantly better than your legal team, have been over this for 6 weeks. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "They found a few interesting things. For example, did you know that when you bought her out, your CFO, a Mr. David Finch, I believe improperly valuated her shares by a factor of, about 500. Anton's blood drained from his face. "And then," Julian continued, "there's the matter of the data breach last quarter, the one you didn't report to the SEC. Tisk, tisk. That's a felony, Anton. I believe the fine for that alone is more than your company's entire market cap." He put his phone away. "So no, you will not be suing Ms. Hayes. You will not be speaking to Ms. Hayes. In fact, you will not say the word Ethel ever again. You are going to go back to your party, and you are going to pray that I don't make a phone call to the Wall Street Journal. Are we clear?" Anton Thorne, the Titan, the visionary, the king looked at Julian Sinclair. And he folded. He visibly crumpled. He nodded a single jerky, pathetic motion. "Good," Julian said. He turned to Stella. "Your car is waiting, Ms. Hayes." He guided her out the massive doors, past the same security guard who had pitied her, and into the cold, clean, victorious night. A black shining Bentley was purring at the curb. As she got in, she looked back. She saw Anton standing alone on the steps, the lights of the gala framing him in a golden hollow prison. Stella didn't sleep. She sat in the back of the Bentley which Julian had simply lent her and directed the driver to her Soho loft. She walked in the smell of turpentine and oil paint, a grounding familiar comfort. She didn't turn on the lights. She just walked to her massive floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the black sky bleed into gray, then into the fiery, hopeful orange of dawn. She was the same woman who had left this apartment 12 hours ago, and she was a different person entirely. At 6:00 a.m., her phone, a simple 3-year-old iPhone, began to vibrate. It didn't stop. It buzzed on her reclaimed wood coffee table, a frantic, angry insect. Forbes, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch. Page 6. Sarah, her friend, was the first one she answered. "Oh my God!" Sarah screamed, no greeting necessary. "I'm looking at a picture of you, Julian Sinclair, and a very constipated-looking Anton Thorne. What is happening?" Stella laughed. It was a real, genuine laugh. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this." At 7:00 a.m., the real call started. Banks, law firms, real estate agents offering her new appropriate office space. At 7:30 a.m., her old mentor, Professor Alistair Finch, called. "Stella, my girl," he said, his voice thick with pride. "I heard you made quite an impression. I told Julian you were the one. I told him, she's not just a prodigy, she's the whole damn revolution." You set this up?" Stella asked, sinking into her worn velvet armchair. "I just opened the door, Stella. You kicked it off the hinges all by yourself. He's been looking for a way to get at Thorne for years, you know." "What, why?" "Ah," Alistair chuckled. "That's not my story to tell. But let's just say, Anton wasn't the first person whose code he borrowed." At 8:00 a.m., there was a knock on her door. Not her buzzer. Her door. Which meant someone had gotten past the lobby security. She looked through the peephole. It was Julian Sinclair. He was holding 2 large cups of coffee. She opened the door. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray cashmere sweater. He looked normal, and somehow even more powerful. "May I?" he asked. She stepped aside. He walked into her loft, his eyes taking in everything: the half-finished canvases, the stacks of books on quantum physics, the Ethel white papers pinned to a corkboard. He smiled. "This is where it happens." He handed her a coffee. It was from a simple bodega, not some fancy Starbucks. "I figured you'd be awake," he said. I don't know what to say," Stella said, clutching the warm cup. "Thank you. You saved me." Julian's smile faded. He looked at her, his gray eyes sharp. "Let's be very clear about one thing, Miss Hayes. Stella, I did not save you." He gestured to the corkboard. "You did this. You built the life raft. You built the battleship. All I did was provide the launch." "But the $250 million, the timing, the show," she said. "The show," he laughed. "The show was a personal bonus. Anton Thorne is a pest, a man who steals other people's work and calls himself a visionary. I have no patience for them." He took a sip of his coffee. "You asked Alistair why. 15 years ago, Anton Thorne was my graduate student. He was brilliant and lazy. He was my prized pupil, and he stole my thesis." Stella stared. "What?" "My thesis. It was the original architecture for, you guessed it, Thorne Dynamics. He took it, filed the patents himself, dropped out, and started his company. By the time I realized what had happened, he was the next Steve Jobs. And I was just a bitter professor." "So last night," Stella said. "Last night," Julian said, "was not revenge. Revenge is a petty emotion. Last night was a correction, a market correction. I have spent the last 15 years building my own empire, waiting for the person who could not only beat Anton, but who could build what I wanted to build. The thing he stole. But better." He looked at her. "He stole my past, Stella. You are the future. Ethel isn't just a protocol. It's the evolution of my own work. It's what I would have built if I'd had your genius." Stella was speechless. He wasn't her knight in shining armor. He was her partner. "So," he said, draining his cup, "thank you for the coffee. A car will be here at 9 a.m. We have a board to assemble, a company to staff, and an empire to build. And I suspect a few dozen interview requests to manage. I've taken the liberty of hiring the best PR firm in New York. They serve us, not the other way around." He walked to the door. "Oh, and one more thing." He turned. "The headlines today are all about me and you. Billionaire backs ousted ex-wife. It's dramatic. It's gossip." "I know," Stella said, her heart sinking. "I've scheduled your first interview, 10 a.m., with Forbes, not Page 6. Forbes. By noon, the narrative will not be the ex-wife's revenge, and the narrative will be the architect's ascension. The story is not about who you left. It's about what you're building." He smiled that terrifying, wonderful smile. "Welcome to the game, Ms. Hayes." He left. Stella stood in her loft, the morning sun streaming in, illuminating the specks of dust that danced in the air. She picked up her buzzing phone. She looked at the screen. A new unknown number. A text message. "Stella, baby, pick up. We need to talk. We can fix this. We were always the best team. Don't let him poison you against me." It was from Anton. Stella Hayes, CEO and founder of Ethel, looked at the text. She smiled, and she pressed block. The next 6 months were not a fairy tale. They were a war. It was a war fought in the sterile, soundproof conference rooms of law firms, on the scathing, anonymous forums of TechCrunch, and in the silent 300 a.m. glare of a terminal as Stella's team raced against Anton's. He did not go quietly. He was a cornered animal, and he lashed out with the predictable, clumsy brutality of a man who had never had to truly fight. He launched a dozen frivolous lawsuits claiming intellectual property theft, breach of fiduciary duty, and spousal conspiracy. He fed gossip columnists like his old contact at Page Six, lurid anonymous stories about Stella's erratic behavior, her vindictive nature, her mental instability post-divorce. He tried to poach her new hires, offering them double their salaries to return to Thorne Dynamics. It was a fatal miscalculation. He was playing checkers. Stella and Julian were playing 3D chess. For every lawsuit, Julian's legal team from Sullivan and Cromwell didn't just defend, they countersued, filing discovery motions that plunged into the dark, rotten heart of Thorne Dynamics' finances. For every gossip page smear, Stella's new PR team responded with an exclusive, high-minded feature in Wired or Forbes that focused on the undeniable mathematical brilliance of the Ethel protocol and the poaching. When Anton tried to steal her new head of engineering, Stella responded by having a quiet lunch with Anton's entire R&D leadership team. 2 weeks later, they all resigned and came to work for Ethel. She didn't just take his future, she bought his past right out from under him, leaving him with a hollowed-out shell of a company. The war ended 6 months to the day after the gala. Stella stood on the keynote stage at Synapse 2026. The single most important tech conference in the world. The auditorium was a sea of 5,000 faces, all turned toward her. She was not the woman in the vintage velvet dress. This Stella was an entirely new creation. She wore a severe dark blue Armani suit that was less a piece of clothing than a piece of armor. Her hair was cut in a sharp professional bob. In the front row, Julian Sinclair sat arms crossed watching. He was not smiling like a proud father. He was watching as a satisfied investor as his prize asset prepared to corner the market. We are living in an age of digital ghosts. Stella began, her voice calm and resonant, filling the vast space. The room, which had been buzzing, fell into a profound, reverent silence. Your identity, your assets, your private memories, they are not yours. They are commodities. They are shadows on a server wall held in trust by corporations who have proven time and again to be untrustworthy. She moved across the stage with a slow, deliberate grace. They sell you a safer world, a better lock, a stronger vault, but they are all fundamentally flawed, because a lock is just a puzzle waiting for the right mind to solve it. She clicked a remote. Behind her, the Ethel logo, a simple, elegant geometric lattice, blazed to life. Ethel is not a lock, she said. It is the abolition of the door. It is a world where your data is not an object to be stored, but a part of you, decentralized, quantum encrypted, and answerable only to you. We are not building a new vault. We are building a new world. And in this world, she paused, her eyes sweeping the crowd. There are no ghosts. There is only mathematical truth. She was not a CEO. She was a revolutionary. She was, in a word, inevitable. When she finished, the silence held for a beat, and then the auditorium erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. It was the sound of 5,000 people realizing they had just seen the future. Stella walked off stage, the sound of her name echoing behind her. Her new assistant handed her a water. Her hand, still electric with adrenaline, was shaking slightly. Her personal phone buzzed in her pocket. Not her work phone. Her personal one. She pulled it out. It was a text from the head of her legal team. It's done. Thorne Dynamics just filed for Chapter 11. The board has ousted Anton effective immediately. We've begun the acquisition of their core server patents per your instruction. Congratulations. Stella stared at the screen. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel relief. She felt a quiet, cold click. Like a complex locking mechanism, a 15-year-long equation had finally solved itself. It was not triumph. It was closure. Julian was waiting in the wings. He'd seen her read the text. He didn't say congratulations. He just nodded once. The war was over. The correction was complete. That evening there was a party. It was on the 80th floor rooftop of the new Ethel headquarters in the World Trade Center. a vast glass-walled office that made the city look like a circuit board of captured stars. This was not a party. It was a coronation. Stella was standing by the glass looking down at the rivers of light when Julian joined her. He handed her a glass of champagne. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble against the polite murmur of the party. "The architect." She smiled, clinking his glass. "The kingmaker." "I prefer venture capitalist," Julian murmured. "It's far more terrifying and far more accurate to a successful launch." They drank. They stood in silence for a moment, two equals surveying the kingdom. "What happened to them?" Stella asked quietly, her voice almost lost to the wind. Julian took a sip. "Isabella was smarter than any of us gave her credit for. She filed for divorce 2 months ago, the moment our third lawsuit hit Anton's personal accounts. Her settlement was generous. She'd wisely put his private jet and the Hamptons estate in her name during the honeymoon phase. A prenup is only as good as the spouse who reads it." "Where is she?" "Currently influencing in Dubai. She'll be fine. She was, as you noted, a smart woman. Just lazy." Stella's smile was thin. "And Anton's bankrupt," Julian said with a note of finality. "Personally and corporately. Wiped out. The SEC investigation into his data breach took care of the rest." "What will he do?" "He'll never work in tech again," Julian stated. It was a fact, not a prediction. We made sure of that. The non-competes we acquired from his own bankrupt company, they were ironclad. He can't legally write a line of code for profit for the next 10 years. He swirled his champagne, a flicker of dark amusement in his eyes. "I did hear he's trying to raise capital for a pivot, a new venture." "Oh," Stella asked, turning to look at him. "Artisanal kombucha." Stella laughed. It wasn't the rusty, broken laugh from her loft. It was a deep, rich, powerful sound. "He stole my past," Julian said, his voice serious again. "And he stole your present. But you, Stella, you took his future." He gestured to the party, the building, the city. "You didn't just take his company. You took his name. In this world, that's everything." Stella looked back out at the view. She thought about that night 6 months ago. The humiliation. The silent walk. The feeling of 500 pairs of eyes on her, full of pity, contempt, and morbid curiosity. From this height, the whole city was staring up at her. Not at an ex-wife, not at a victim, not at a billionaire's pet project. They were staring at the architect. "To bedrock," Julian said, raising his glass. Stella turned from the window, her eyes clear, cold, and brilliant. She raised her glass to his. "No," she said. "To building." The story of Stella Hayes isn't just about revenge. It's about value. Anton Thorne thought her value was in the past, something he could buy out and discard. But Julian Sinclair and the rest of the world saw her true value, which was in the future she was building. She didn't need a knight in shining armor to save her. She needed an investor who was smart enough to see the architect behind the shadows. What did you think of Stella's ultimate power move? Was Julian's play a rescue, or just a brilliant business decision? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is the kind of drama that happens in boardrooms and ballrooms every single day. If you love stories about justice, ambition, and the sweet, sweet taste of success, then like this video. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel. We have so many more stories to tell, and you don't want to miss a single one. End conclusion.